This tutorial will demonstrate how to combine multiple light sources in RayTK scenes. Support for multiple light sources was added in version 0.23, so you'll need to use at least that version. There is a download link in the description. Start by dropping the toolkit talks into your project. Open the palette using the Alt-R shortcut. Create a RayMarch Render 3D. And then create a null top connected to the output so you can see what it's rendering. For preview purposes, I'm going to set the resolution to 1800 by 1400, but feel free to use whatever resolution you want. Right, create a prism SDF and connect it to the first input on the renderer. Set the axis to Y, and then set the prism type to hexagon. Create an arrange operator and insert it between the prism and the renderer. The arrange operator is similar to simple union or combine. It lets you combine up to 8 SDFs. It also supports easily switching the inputs on and off, and changing their position. Create a plain SDF and connect it to the second input on the arrange. Set the offset to -1, and then create another prism SDF. And connect it to the arrange as well. Set the axis to Y, and then keep the prism type as triangle. Then set the radius to 0.2, and the height to 0.5, and then the translate Y to -0.5. Create a modulo polar and insert it between the second prism and the arrange. Set the axis to Y, and then set the first part of the offset to 2. So that gives us a kind of ring of shapes around the central shape. We're now going to use a feature called Editor Tools that was added in the previous version of RayTK. Check out my Patreon page for a tutorial with more details about it. Select the renderer and make sure nothing else is selected, and then use a different shortcut, Alt-Shift-R. This will open a menu of tools, of actions that we can take to modify the scene. So use the Add Look At camera to create a new camera and then attach it to the renderer. On the camera, set the position to 0, 4, 5, and then set the FOV angle to 75. That gives us kind of a wider view there. And if you want, you can also adjust the look at position to kind of center it, setting like the Z to 1. Create a modular matte and insert it between the arrange and the renderer. Make sure that the modular matte is selected and nothing else is, and then use that Alt-Shift-R shortcut again. This time we're going to add a diffuse lighting element and set the method to Oren-Nair and set their roughness to 1. Then select the modular matte again and use that Alt-Shift-R shortcut to open the menu and add a specular lighting element. On the specular shading element, we're going to set the method to ggx, and then set the roughness here to 1 and the Fresnel also to 1. So those two techniques, the Oren-Nyer and the TGX, tend to work well together, so it's usually a good starting point for a material. So we're still using the default lighting in the scene, so now we're going to add our own light. So create a point light, and connect it to the second or the third input, the light input on the renderer. Set the Y position to 2.5 and the Z to 0.5. And that gives us a single light source. But what we want is to combine multiple light sources. So create a multiLight and insert that between the point light and the renderer. MultiLight is a new operator in version 0.23 that lets you combine up to 8 different lighting sources and makes it easy to toggle them on and off. So create another point light and connect it to the second input on the multiLight. On this one, we're going to set the position to 1, 2, 0. And then to highlight the differences between the two lights, we're going to use different colors for them. So on this first one, I'm going to use a green like 0.3, 1, and 0.4. And then on the second light, I'm going to use a purple like 0.9, 0.3, and 1. Next, we're going to use attenuation to limit the range of the lights. So selecting both of the point light operators here, click this attenuated setting to enable that. And then set the start of the range to 3 and the end to 7. So that means that at a distance of 3 from that light position, it starts to be at full, it stays at full brightness, and then as it goes to a distance of 7, it fades to dark. So we'll now add some motion to the lights. So one thing that's important to note is that transform operators and other position-based filters don't currently work for lights. This should be fixed in future versions, but at least as of version 0.23, the only way to set the light position is using the light's position parameter. Right. Select the first light, and then use the new Alt-Shift-R shortcut, and choose Animate with LFO, and then use the Position X parameter. So that will create one of these LFO generator components, and it will attach it to that parameter to animate it. So on the LFO generator, we're going to switch off sync and then set this period to something like 10, and then set the wave to sine. So we get a nice back and forth motion there. Then select the second light, and we're going to repeat this process. So open the Editor Tools menu using Alt-Shift-R, and choose Animate with LFO. On this one, we're going to also animate the X position, and switch off sync, and then set the free period to a different number, like 8, and then use the sine wave. And then for this one, we're going to set the amplitude to 1.5, give it a little bit broader of a range. Then we're going to select the second light again. We're going to create another LFO, this one on the Z parameter. Now you could set one on the position parameter as a whole and it would animate all 3 parts, but currently the LFO generator doesn't let you set different periods for the different parts of the parameter, which is what we want here. So instead we're going to just separately animate the Z. And on this one, like the others, we're going to switch off sync and then set the free period to something like 12, and it's a sine wave, and then we'll just keep the amplitude at 1 for that one. So to recap, we are combining a few SDFs using this arrange operator, which lets us easily toggle elements on and off. And we could also position them if we wanted to. Then we are using a modular material with a diffuse and a specular shading element, which we created by selecting the modular matte and using the Alt-Shift-R shortcut and using add diffuse and add specular. Then we are combining multiple light sources using a multi-light by connecting 2 different point lights to the inputs of that, and then connecting that multi-light to the 3rd input on the renderer. And we're then using 3 of these LFO generators to animate parameters of the lights to set the position there. And remember that setting the position parameter is currently, as of version 0.23, the only way to change the position. Operators like translate and rotate and stuff don't currently work on lights, but that is expected to change in future versions. You can play with, such as enabling or disabling shadows for individual lights. And it's worth noting that the shadows can have a significant impact on performance, so it will speed things up if you disable them for lights that you don't need to cast shadows. So if you just have kind of a general lighting that kind of gives color to the surfaces without needing shadows, then you can just switch that off and it saves you some GPU resources. And that's it for this tutorial. Check out my Patreon for more subscriber-only content like scene files and more tutorials and early access to features and tutorials. As always, feel free to reach out on the Touch Designer Discord or on Instagram if you have questions. There are links to all of that in the video description. Thanks for watching.